1954, one of the top grossing pictures of that year was a flick called The Egyptian. So I went and watched that. It is in the same style. I'll have to check if it's actually the same people. Some of the actors are the same. Of the robe, and of the same year, it's Demetrius and the Gladiators. They made it that year. So the year before they made the robe, Demetrius and the Gladiators. This year, Victor Mature, Gene Simmons, and a bunch of other people who are not part of the robe are in this. However, this is not part of that actual universe. It is not the robe cinematic universe. It's not that. It's just same people. It is after a book, so that is similar, but it's not Lloyd C. Douglas. It is from a Finnish writer whose name I'm not going to pronounce because Finnish. I did look up the book. There's a good Wikipedia, nice long Wikipedia about that, what is in that. The book is from 1945, and the translation, the English translation is from the Swedish translation from the Finnish, because Finnish is actually pretty difficult. It's one of the more difficult languages in the world, so I understand. But by the time it gets to Hollywood, and to an American audience, and then to Hollywood, it's the translation of the Swedish translation.
It doesn't matter. They're going to change everything anyway.
Yeah. You are quite on the nose, because I didn't know it was from a book when I started watching. They come on and they do the sort of all the same they do for all these ancient history costume drama thingies. With like setting the scene and then starting with... It had such a vibe of Quo Vadis and the robe. It's so similar, and almost immediately I sort of went, "Oh God, is this going to be a religious costume drama?" Because that was the robe and Quo Vadis, and fair enough. But the Egyptian is set about 13th century BCE. That is 3,300 years ago. That is a full 1,300 years before certain events happened, like in the year 0. That's event. So it cannot possibly be a Christo religious drama, can it?
No, don't tell me. No.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yep, it's The book was written about a fella in history, or a fellow as he could have been in history. The interesting thing about 1333 centuries ago in Egypt, 1300 years BCE, is that we actually know quite a bit from all the excavations. The Egyptians were wonderful in the fact that once a person was important enough to bury, the tomb is full of information about their life. So we know a lot about court physicians of that era. We know about tax collectors and minor nobles, which is later we know nothing. We know a couple of names of some kings and maybe their queens, but of the Middle Ages we know very little. We know these people. We know people, even smaller people, like the guy who runs the group that cuts the tombs. We know stuff about this person because he got a burial of his own with some information on it. Because the religion, the Egyptian religion, required that the gods know what the person did, and the one way to know that is when you after you die, you go visit the god Toth, and you actually have to go through an entire trial. The Book of the Dead shows you what the trials is you have to go through. And you need that information, so this information is on the inside of the tombs. And now we have it. The information about the person's life, which you may have forgotten because you died, and then you forget, but you have to go tell Toth about it. This information is on the tomb. What expectation you might have of the afterlife, you have to be reminded of it. So life of Egypt is inside of the tombs on the walls. We know all that stuff, and we know names of people. And so this Finnish fella wrote a lovely story about 13th century BCE life of such a person. Great. If you read the Wikipedia, it's actually a pretty good story. And nominally, this movie does that story. But a book is not a movie. A movie is not a book. What you can do in a book is meander. Meandering in a book is fine. It's perfect. That's what books are for. You have one meandering here, and then you meander there, and in the end you make a point. Films are not allowed to do that, and this film does that. It meanders. It does the meandering that the book does. And I saw it in The Rope, and a little bit as well that they had trouble getting out of the meander. They did succeed in The Rope. They fail in this thing. They meander like crazy, and so we have Victor Mature, we have Gene Simmons, we have Peter Ustinov in a too small a part, and we have a chappie you'd never seen before, an Edmund Pandem, as the main character. And the problem is that Ustinov is good. Ustinov is always good.
Of course.
Jim Simmons is okay, but her part is really small.
She should be good.
She gets no chance.
Oh.
And everybody else sucks.
No, Victor Mature.
Victor Mature also sucks.
No.
Yeah, he sucks.
Well, then I put it on the director.
Yes, this is on the director. Because, like I said, Peter Ustinov doesn't require a director. But Gene Simmons requires a little bit of help from the director. Also help from the role, but the director would be helpful. And she can't save this, so... and I was going, what is the problem with this movie? Why is it like that? And I think what the problem is all throughout the movie is that, because we have a lot of different, I'll cut to what we have, is every scene is filmed with the same intensity. And the whole thing becomes as flat as a pancake. And that is a problem. That's a great big problem with this movie. And this is apart from the actual content of the movie.
Yeah, so the director wasn't able, and the script wasn't able to build up tension and then make it flow and then go to a crescendo and end the movie.
Exactly, but also just within the scenes. The only scenes that are any good are the Peter Ustinov scenes where he is just talking to a side character and having a little bit of banter. This is the actual only good scene in the entire movie. All the rest, everything is flat. Not just the entire overall arc of the film, but also within each scene you don't have a build-up and a crescendo. Even Gene Simmons, she has one scene with Peter Ustinov, and she gets so little help from the director that her part is bad. It's not good. I mean, she's always she's not as bad as the rest of the stuff. And Victor Mature, he needs a lot. I mean, he needs a normal amount of help from the director, and so the director, I don't know if the director is just having an off day, or something, or not enough time, or whatever it is. I'll look up if he did anything else, but this is not good. And this is apart from the content of the movie, because it is... I did check with the original story. Yes, it is set in the time of Akhenaten. He reigned from 1353 or 1351 to about 15 years. I think he did like 15 years of reign. In actual history, it happened that he, for reasons of we don't know, we have some guesses, but we don't know, he suddenly stopped worshipping the regular gods and just picked one and went with that, to the point that because Egyptian economy, and the wiki says that the book is really good at explaining how Egyptian economy actually worked, because they had no money, don't have no coinage, but they had an economy, and it was very dependent on the granaries that the religious class was running, because you need somewhere to port all that grain, because Egypt, and people who know the Bible know that part at least, Egypt would suffer periodical disasters, and either it was famines, or it was floodings, or it was locusts. These things would happen. These happened periodically, and you had to, if you planned for it, you would be not happy, but fine. And planning for it meant to make a lot of grain and then store the grain somewhere safe. Where are you going to store it? Somewhere safe that is protected by something. Religion protects the granaries. You put a bunch of priests on it, you put a god with it, and they protect, the people will protect the granaries economically, but religiously as well. And that is how Egypt had been working for 2,500 years before Akhenaten even showed up. And then they had like 100 odd gods, like about 15 major gods and 100 minor gods. So there was always somebody to worship. Great. And then Akhenaten comes and says, no, we're going to do just the one god. The Aten, which is the actual sun disk, the little circle that the sun is, known as the Aten. We're now going to worship that, and that would have been fine if he had not said, yeah, and we're going to stop giving any attention to the other ones. He didn't exactly say they don't exist, they are not the gods, the other gods are not gods, and therefore that is why I'm not interested. He just says I'm not interested, and then actually makes him not a monotheist but I wrote it down, Henotheists. The Henotheism is the viewpoint and belief that there may be more than one deity, but that only one of them is to be worshipped. That's Akhenaten in a nutshell. That's what he did. Economically, it was a disaster because deities had their priests who needed money from the government to run their priesthoods, to run their temples, to run their granaries. And that is the actual problem of actual reality. And that is why 15 years of somebody who says no more money to anybody else but to my God was a disaster, and it went to a kind of a civil war, except that it wasn't, because the Pharaoh is God. You do not rebel against God. The Pharaoh has to go way worse than this, and it was pretty bad. But the conclusion of the actual story is that he died. We are not sure whether or not he was murdered. Possibly not. Then his first a figure took over who may have been his wife, who took a male aspect as Smenkare and took over for a while, but this person died pretty quickly, and then Tutankhamun, the little son, took over. He was about 10. He reigned another 8 years, and then he died of bad genes, basically. He was too closely related to other people in his family. He left no issue because he married his sister, and they were already too closely related. So yeah, that didn't work out, and the dynasty moved on to the vizier, who may not have been Smenkare's, Nefertiti's father, but not blood relative to the pharaoh. He's not a pharaoh. And his heir, I have to look up if it was his son, is Horemheb. Horemheb is in this thing played by Victor Mature. And this is where we get into trouble with the movie, because they go from they want to do Akhenaten, and they want to portray him as a proto Jesus, straight up, unfortunately, complete with the sign of the Ankh, which is the sign of life in Egypt, which is the cross with the little hook on it. They're wearing it like it is the Christian cross. They come to a crisis like it's a Christian crisis, and I hate this movie for this. Chap who plays Akhenaten, I was going, hey, I know him. I want to look him up. I want to stop the movie and look him up. And I did look him up. He's a British actor who didn't last very long, unfortunately, because people die. But I have seen him in other things. He can be really good, but this role sucks. So this is not even any of the main characters yet, because the main character is Sinuhe. Sinuhe, the court physician who gets into the middle of all of this, and I had to check with the Wikipedia. Yes, it is set in the time of Akhenaten, and very nominally, if you read the Wikipedia of the book, you get some of the events that are in the movie. But not, because there's not a word of Christianity in the book. It is what it's supposed to be, the story of what a court physician in the time of Akhenaten might have been like. And the book does all the problems and all the succession stuff and all how economy works and everything. And this movie... Let's talk about some of the things that are actually good about the movie. It is nice to see a movie about Egyptians that actually take on they looked at the arts, they looked at the diversity. There is actually quite a bit of diversity in this. Sinuhe comes to events to the old queen, and she has some African... I don't know if they're slaves, because nobody says anything like that, but servants. People who are in the servitorial... attendants. Yeah, attendants. She has attendants who are African, obviously. And then she has attendants who are African, and then he later on meets a Babylonian courtesan who has attendants who are more... I'm not sure what they are, but I think they probably would have been Indian, from India. Because historically, that's actually pretty good. It's location of... Yes. Yeah. The location from where they are in Egypt is actually Northern Africa. And people make that mistake a lot, but Northern Africa is not sub-Saharan Africa. People have a Middle Eastern look. And they've checked with mummies from periods like that, which we have, with people now in Egypt. They are genetically in line. They are the same people. So what we have now in Egypt is what was then in Egypt, and that is bronzed colored. But of course, if you go south, and not that even that much further south, you're in Ethiopia. What is now Ethiopia, what was then was the land of Kush. And everybody is sub-Saharan African black. So they would have known black people. So them showing up, either as a servant or slave, the scene doesn't say, so we don't know. Or with the Babylonian, who is actually... Babylonia is more east, and then if you go more east, not that far. I mean, Alexander the Great got that far. He got all the way to India. You have India, and you get people from India. And so that the Babylonian has some Indian attendants and the queen has sub-Saharan African attendants seems perfect. And this, I think, this is the moment to show those things. in 1954, when you don't have black actors and you don't have Indian brown-skinned actors at all in your stock, you get what you can. And they actually got, for the Babylonian, who is in the story a foreigner who comes to Egypt to be a courtesan, basically, they got somebody in who has an accent, who actually, the actress herself is not English native speaker and has an accent. And this is the time to use it. And I think that is commendable about this movie. There's a lot of, in that way, it's good about the good things about the movie. It's just... and her storyline, which is in the book, the book tells the story of the physician who is actually a adoptee. He was a foundling and adopted by the older physician, and then trains to be a physician. A job that is in Egypt that much time ago an important job, but because they do a lot with death, you need to do a lot with medicine, basically. So there are a lot of people who did that, but you could become really, really rich doing that. So he gets a good education where he may not have had one, where he possibly is of poor descent. But the Egyptians didn't care about that. They were very much in picking up a kid and then moving it on in life, and or not. They were also strange about marriage. And the book, the film actually has a problem with it because they actually run into a mistake, because he meets the Jin Simmons character and they hold hands for a bit, and then he goes away for a bit because the film meanders too much, and years later he comes back and then she has a 10-year-old child, and they just held hands, But in Egypt, if you go back to the book, that makes, not actually sense, but in Egypt, marrying the way that we do now with a big ceremony and white and a church and lots of brouhaha, they didn't do that back then. Back then, you just held hands and said, and now we're married and we're making a life together. So she took him to bed, obviously, otherwise there wouldn't have been a kid, but it is his kid, definitely his kid. And the film, because it's trying to be a religious something, trying to fit in the Christianity thing, they just gloss over it because they don't know what to do with it. He didn't marry her and they had a kid together. Where's that kid from? Otherwise, that kid is going to come from one of the other patrons at the alehouse, and she is supposed to be the nice girl.
Do you think that they found the book, they wanted to, somehow got the rights to the book, and then they said, oh dear, but what about the Hays Code? And then basically gave it to a scriptwriter and said, please sanitize this for the Hays Code.
Yes, that, and make it a Christian-based, make Akhenaten Jesus.
Well, but it fits into all the big ancient world dramas like Quo Vadis, The Robe, etc. But the excuse for them is that it is a Christian film with a Christian message, and everything that is debauchery and non-Christian and fighty and whatever, that's all in there because to show how barbarous they were.
And that's true.
And they get to do all the orgies and the barbarism.
Yes, but I think you picked for Akhenaten, you picked the wrong fella. Because the moment you open up a book on Akhenaten, he turns out to be the villain of the story. He is not a nice guy. Yeah, he went for one deity, but like I said, it's not monotheism, it is something else. And he not only did he go for one god, he went for one family and basically one person. He put himself up as god, and everybody else can go to shite. And he took up once it became clear that people were not. I mean, everybody was falling in line because Pharaoh is God, so you do what he says. But he basically they didn't want to destroy Thebes for him, just flatten all the temples in Thebes, and only do Aten. People didn't want to do that. Simply, literally not possible to do that. So he took up the entire court, found a space that was nothing there. There was no water there. It's now called Amarna. He called it Akhenaten, named after the Aten again and after himself. The city of Akhenaten. Plonked everybody there. The place was unlivable. Made them build a palace, made them build all the stuff that you need to have to be a king. I mean, this guy was God in a practical sense. He could just say, this is a hole in the ground, we're making it the best place on earth. And people did it. That is power. And I'm surprised at all that he's completely Looney Tunes, because if you get power like that, you're going to go completely Looney Tunes. And the moment he died, and I think they were at Amarna like 7 years or something like that. I think they were like 7 years in the first capital, and then Amarna about 7 years. The moment he keeled over, people dropped the stuff they were doing. There's that wonderful statue of Nefertiti, beautiful carved head, and the one eye is not quite right. And you think, oh, that's decay. No. They were making that at the moment. And the moment they heard Akhenaten is dead, they dropped everything they were holding. They have found Amarna. They have found these workshops where this stuff is dropped on the floor. And they walked out because it was unlivable. It was impossible. Akhenaten is not your savior in any way, shape, or form. No. So watching this movie do that, and in 54 they knew most of this, and a lot of the discoveries about Akhenaten, because this line, the Egyptians go in dynasties, and because this dynasty comes to an end with his son Tutankhamun, and he was very unceremoniously stuffed into a hole and completely forgotten, because the heretic Pharaoh, who was his father, they wanted to forget everything about this guy. They wanted him gone. They actually desecrated Akhenaten's own old tomb, and got rid of Tutankhamun. He actually has Counselor Ai's tomb, and I took Tutankhamun's tomb for himself because it's much bigger, and this one was found and robbed clean. But because nobody knew about this guy and it was such a small tomb, people forgot about him, and this is why we have Tutankhamun. And a lot of the information of the entire dynasty is from the fact that it was a forgotten dynasty, that it was vilified and eradicated, but not good enough, So that is interesting historically. This movie is not that history. And so it ends with, I mean, you can watch the movie as an exercise somewhere if you want to. It ends with Sinuhe's youth friend, Horemheb, who becomes, where Sinuhe becomes a physician. Horemheb goes into the army. He likes that sort of thing. Becomes, in this story, he takes over from when he convinces Sinuhe to actually poison Akhenaten, because it's impossible anyway. And he's too good to be true, and the world cannot take that, so Sinuhe poisons Akhenaten, and then Horemheb takes over as Pharaoh. Picture mature. And picture mature is not good enough to. I mean, he does stately very enough, but I'm gonna cry now. I mean, this is... some of the production values are really nice. Peter Ustinov is really nice. He plays the Sinuhe's servant really well. It's actually, I think, probably one of his earlier roles in Hollywood. I mean, he was around, of course, but he wasn't big yet, so... I'm not sure what to say about it. It's the action scenes are too long, but that's 1954. The action scenes were too long. They were so expensive that they drew them out. Nice scenery. Nice scenery.
Costuming.
Nice attention to historical detail. Nice costuming. Now, the costuming is more okay than nice. The Egyptians, we know, dressed very provocatively. I mean, they had if you were a young lady, you had your full boobies out, and Jean Simmons, who would have been that kind of young lady as a serving wench at a tavern, she would have had the boobies out. Of course, she's wearing the full bullet bra and the more interesting is actually for females. They're not doing very well for females in this, and on the whole, Egyptians are really good at females. But you have the old queen, she has a scene which was okay, and then you have the sister, Akhenaten's sister, who is actually interesting in that she's where Akhenaten, and that is historical. Akhenaten was very androgynous. And we don't know exactly why, but it may have been actually genetic. There is a genetic disorder that you can have where you were...
Intersex.
And no, he's not Maybe not. We're not sure. Stuff is so degraded that we're having problems finding out. Here, in this film, and I don't know if the book does that, they make the sister the more butch one, and he's not in any way femme or ephemerate, because... they're not going to do that to the actor. But the actor is the thinner type, and he's doing the I'm looking at Jesus there, and there's a lion coming, and then somebody else has to save him because he's doing God over there. So that is not badly done. And then the sister is the more butch one, and she's annoyed that she cannot be Pharaoh, which was a general annoyance that some of these pharaoh people had. However, if you know your history, then you know, like a little bit later, a little bit earlier, I think possibly a little bit later, you get Queen Hatshepsut, who just said, fuck it that I'm a girl, I'm gonna be a pharaoh anyway, and just put on a beard and bang, you're pharaoh. So I suppose that is gonna go with the fashion of the ages, and maybe in this particular time it was not fashionable for girls to want that, and so this lady was having the problem that she would have been a great pharaoh and she would have been proactive because they're enemies, and that is what the film makes as the problem, which is nominally true. For reality is that because Akhenaten is doing God, he's not working on enemies, and Egypt has enemies, and that's the original Akhenaten. Also didn't go to war when he should be going to war. He did go to war at another point, but not when he should have gone to war. But this one doesn't go to war at all, and that's what the central conflict for the victim mature character for Horemheb and Akhenaten and Egypt is about. Because the Hittites are actually proto-Jewish people. The previous versions called Hittites. The Hittites are strong, and they're trying to. Well, they're threatening the Syrians and the Hittites on the east, and the Kushites are at the south. There's nobody in the desert because desert at the west. The Kushites, they have no problem with the Kushites at the point, but Syrians and Hittites are always a problem, and you always need to be on the lookout. You always need to be fighting. The Wikipedia of the book makes the point that the Finn who wrote this, is in Finland. And if you look at the map on Finland, Russia is right next to Finland. And Sweden is actually on the other side. And they had Finland had trouble with both of these peoples at the time of when this book was being written, which is just in the middle of World War II, yeah, they was having problem with Russia, or going to have problem with Russia, and they had them pretty soon after again, before and after and again. So the Wikipedia makes the comparison as Finland versus Egypt, a similar problematic of enemies that always come, that you always have to be prepared for. And Akhenaten doesn't prepare, and Horemheb is upset about this because his country is in jeopardy. And Sinuhe, who has in the book has reason to travel out of Egypt, which gives him a chance to meander around and discover Assyria and the Hittite Empire and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting for a book. Here he actually gets into trouble with... The film is so weird, so I'm not quite sure. He got into trouble and had to leave. Yeah, he got in trouble over the Babylonian girl. I'm going to leave that story for the... It's a good story, but one of the few good stories that is in this book and film is the Babylonian. He has to leave, and he ends up in the Hittite Empire, becoming a physician there, and then later comes back to Egypt, and with the information, and I couldn't find that in the wiki, but it's in the movie, so probably with the information that Hittites have this new material called iron. Hello. Which makes Horemheb sit up and take note, oh my god, these people are really dangerous, we need to do something now. And that puts the whole thing in a tailspin. And
so you got the invention of iron, and basically somebody's trying to invent money. In the book, right? So
no, they're not inventing money.
They're not ready to invent money yet.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I was just going to say, because that would be a reason to write the book, because it's a crossroads in history. Also, just playing the iron is crossroads in history, to go from the Bronze Age. To go from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age is an enormous turnover. I mean, for industry, for trade, for everything.
The crossroads of the point of Akhenaten, I mean, he's very interesting to write about, and I think that is the Finnish writer became interested in Egyptology because of the tomb of Tutankhamun. He was a young lad when it was opened. He got it on. He got all the information in the newspaper. He got He was obsessed and in a good way, interested and obsessed. And when the war happened, he got. You sit on your keister for a bit there because stuff doesn't go in the same way stuff used to go. And he had time to think about it, and then. When the war ended, he just sat down and regurgitated in what he had thought up. And that's how that became. So it was just poof, a wonderful poof, moment of poofness from a Finn about Egyptians. Nothing to do with Jesus. What the wiki also says is that even among Egyptologists, this book has a pretty good rep because it's well researched, it's well thought out. He took in all inner information, made it work together, and he came up with some things that actually turns out to be pretty true. So, a good book, bad movie. Because of the subversion of wanting it to make it a Christian relative story to make Akhenaten a proto-Jesus. No. So. And bad directing, because that's another... If this had really good directing, giving all these actors... Because the fiction mature can do good stuff. if you get a good director. And this chap who played...
I would go one further. Is the director was probably very bad.
I don't know. I haven't looked at it, so I don't know.
If it's not just Victor Mature, I mean, Victor Mature is always solid, but you have to give him the material. He wasn't. Is an awesome actress, so you actively have to make it difficult.
Yeah.
Peter Ustinov, he can act his way out of paper bag while everybody is.
And he did
dancing around him.
He did. And Victor Mature is not unsolid. He is still solid. He's just not good. He's still sucky solid. And Gene Simmons does her lines, but the problem with Gene Simmons particularly, I think, is because her role is actually quite short. She has a scene with Peter Ustinov, and then she has like one scene with the main character, and then she has another scene later. I think Gene Simmons did not have enough information to go on, so she couldn't have saved this. The lines that she delivers, she tries to deliver with gusto, because she has not been told anything, so they're all at the same intensity, because this guy doesn't understand intensity, so everything is delivered in the same way. And Gene Simmons has no information. Peter Ustinov has a little bit more information because, well, his scenes are very short. He has more of them, so he may have been able to glean some more of the story, so he knows what the F he's doing. And he also knows how to take a singular scene and live in it, which is another talent altogether. And a lot of people who do Shakespeare learn how to take this scene that was written 400 years ago by a fellow you don't really understand anymore, because 400 years ago, in a language that is off because 400 years ago, and make something out of it, live in it, give this, I don't understand this person why he does something, but I'm going to give him something of mine anyway to make it something anyway. And Peter Ustinov does that. And Michael Wilding, who plays Akhenaten, he tries very hard. I think what he's trying to do, he's trying it to the best of his abilities, but they're asking him to do the wrong thing here. They're asking him to be, and it is not fun to watch. So not his fault either. But choice of Jesusing up this thing and the direction kills it. And I don't understand. And I think the reason why it would have been one of the top grossing films of that year is just momentum. The names of the actors involved and the momentum of it's the same group that does all these things, so we go and see it, and a lot of people who really buy into the idea of Akhenaten as proto Jesus. That there's a lot of people who buy in that hook, line, and sinker. So this is a bad movie. And you want nice full paper, you go and watch it, but no. I think find the book and read that instead. It's way better. That book, they need to film that book. It is amazingly fun. I was just reading and it was quite a detailed description, and sometimes you go, oh, that's pretty tedious. Oh God, no, it just got better and better and better. And we know so much about this history, and you can actually do the actual history of Akhenaten, which is an amazingly good history of figure out why he went with Aten, why that happened, what is wrong with this guy, what is wrong with the people around him. Why does this happen? It's not going to be a happy story, because none of this is going to end well. Nobody gets to any age at all. And that is one thing that is in the book and in the film, is that this is not a happy age. I mean, everybody dying in misery, and yeah. Egyptians are about death, and that is what the film does show. Definitely, it's about death. This is why I think that the Peanut Gallery is happy that not to have seen it. Death and magical issues is not not a fun day for most people. So, no. And that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.